Call to order the work session, February 12th, 2026. Ms. Johnson, would you like to take the roll call?
Mr. Daniels, Dr. Hubach,
Here.
Ms. Dobson. Here. Mr. Hill.
Here.
Mr. Holbrook.
Here.
Mr. Carnes. Mrs. Purvis. Here. Mr. Vice Chairman, you have a quorum.
All right. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda as listed?
So moved.
All right. And a second,
Second.
Ms. Purvis. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay. I just remind everybody that we are on a tight schedule so that we can get out of here before our 5 o'clock meeting. And Mr. Dupere?
Okay, and again, I'll keep my remarks short, but just thank you for all being here. You're gonna go through two activities today, one for policy updates, which involves 8 policies, which I'll turn over to Ms. Sexton in a minute. And then Mr. Hagler and different individuals will jump in to assist him, Dr. Woodford and different ones. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to Ms. Sexton, and she's gonna go through the 8 policies that are up for review.
Okay, and I did do a little blurb like Mr. Dupere typically does. They are a slightly bit longer so that I could explain to you what changed in a little more detail so that we could get through it faster. If you have any questions about each one or any comments, I'll direct you to the staff member, exec team member that's responsible for that policy. So first we have policy GBB, prohibition against abusive work environments. This is a new policy that was requested by BCPS for Sands Anderson to draft related to abusive work environments. So that one is Dr. Calvert's, if anyone wants to discuss that.
It's actually a policy that I think is pretty standard for everyone to have, that for some reason our policy manual didn't have one. So in the review this summer that Sands Anderson did on our policies, they found that it was missing.
It's kind of a common sense statement too, that says, you know, if you're in an environment that makes you uncomfortable, then say something.
Yeah, we were working on something, I was referred to the policy, and that's when we figured out we didn't have one. I'm like, they're like, you should have one, so.
Good catch.
Okay.
Did anybody have any questions about the policy itself?
Let me just interject, Chris Daniels asked that in the future, we identify where those changes are coming from. So
Yes.
she's gonna be saying it this time, but in the future, when you get that out, there will be a designation of whether it came from SBMA or whether it came from another organization or whether it came from our stockpile of Sands Anderson, so you'll know where they came from.
Did SBMA mention anything about
No.
this?
This came from,
This came from Sands
they
Anderson.
did it for us last summer when we had no one doing it. And
They reviewed all the
they
policies.
reviewed all of the policies, the whole stack of policies, so.
And typically the documents, these policies, anything that's new is underlined in black, and you can see this entire policy is underlined because it's entirely new.
And typically there's only strike through and underline. So strike through is anything we want to get rid of, and underline is anything we want to add. But Mr. Daniels wanted me to add some like color coding or something. So you could designate what was from different areas, if it was state law, if it was from SBMA, if it was from Sands Anderson or us. So moving forward, that will be on the policies, but this time that decision was made after I had already submitted the stuff to Diana.
Yep.
Okay. So policy GCB, employee contracts, was also updated by Sands Anderson to reflect amendment to state law, extending from 90 to 180 teaching days to be the maximum period of time during one school year for which a school board may employ a temporarily employed teacher to fill a teacher vacancy, with certain conditions and restrictions as established in the Code of Virginia. And we also had some other wording changes that we typically did in IGA to maintain consistency across all our policies so the language matches. And that one is Dr. Calvert's also, if anyone has any comments or questions.
Consecutive days or it doesn't matter?
They've gone back and forth with state code. It was originally 180, they went to 90, and now they went back to 180. With the 180, there are specifications in code. For example, the person has to have a baccalaureate degree. They have to not be able to hold a provisional license and not have a license within the Commonwealth within the last 10 years. So there's specific in code to this one. That if you're going to pick someone to do 180 days, they have to have a BS and not be eligible for a license, basically. Because I think if they're eligible for a license, then you probably should just put them under contract. You know what I mean? Instead of paying them.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering,
Yeah, so I think it's a protection that way.
I got you.
And then the rest of it is just small little, we took out the purpose, things to make them consistent.
Where it strikes through the 90 and puts in the 180 teaching days in such a vacancy.
Mhm.
Then the following line that was added has 90 teaching days in it. Is that correct?
For a period of time, but no longer, see up top, it says no longer than 180. And in the underlined, it says to fill a teacher vacancy for more than 90. So you never can go more than 180, but, so the tops, you can't go more than 180. But if you go more than 90, if you go 91, then they have to have a degree and not eligible for a provisional.
Okay.
Okay. IGE, adult education. We do always throw in a few policies that have not been looked at for many years, just so that we've put our eyes on them and the board has seen them. So this policy really doesn't have many changes. It was last reviewed in 2018. The only changes are the same with the wording to maintain consistency across all policies. There's also a missing legal reference to point to the Code of Virginia definition of adult education and some revisions to outdated cross-references. So there really weren't any changes to that.
No further questions on that?
Okay, policy IM, evaluation of instructional programs, was last edited by a previous employee that was over policies in 2012, so I have no idea when that was actually last revised. During the BCPS review of this policy, it was determined that it is not required by state law. It is assumed that we created it for personalized learning, but the policy is unclear and is being recommended for deletion. If you have any questions about that, Dr. Woodford can help you.
It's just obsolete.
So
Pretty much. So we're
It
not
was-
gonna be doing evaluations? I'm sorry.
now, oh no,
What is
we'll,
this?
we'll evaluate programs. We have policy on standardized assessments, SOLs, all of that. This particular policy was talking about evaluations outside of that. It was specifically written to evaluate personalized learning when Dr. Shook was here. So to basically say there would be some exceptions if you were doing personalized learning, you came under a different evaluation system that was more walkthroughs and visual. So we've not used this particular policy. All of our things are addressed under curriculum, assessment with SOLs, things like that.
Okay. All right, policy JC.
Okay, I'm gonna lump three policies together and explain them at once. So we've got policy JC, school attendance areas, JCD, school zone transfers, and JCE, non-residents. These policies related to attendance zones and school transfers were updated to change the mention of the word zone transfer or school zone transfer to just say school transfer, to reflect that this is a school transfer as opposed to a transfer to one of the three school zones. In addition, a sentence was added to policy JCD to specify that parents of students attending a school in BCPS who move out of the school's attendance zone to another Bedford County residence may continue to have their student attend the school until the student has completed the sequence of grades offered at that school, but the parents would have to provide transportation. So pretty much all it is telling them they have to provide transportation and taking out the word zone so that it's just a school transfer and not specifying a specific zone. Okay. And the last policy is JFCJ, extra and co-curricular participation. This policy was revised by Sands Anderson to reflect amendment to state law regarding the requirement of a signed pre-participation physical examination form submitted to the principal, attesting that a student received a physical examination and was found to be physically fit for athletic competition no more than 14 calendar months prior to the date on which such report was signed before a middle or high school student shall be a participant or try out for any school athletic team or squad. Revisions also include removing BCPS language on what constitutes a school day for six period and block schedules, since our schools are now all on a 7-period day, and changing other wording, as I said before, to maintain consistency across all policies. And that's the last one, so if nobody has any questions about that.
Any questions? So this would move to, correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Johnson, it moves to notification or information or
Action at the March meeting.
action in the March meeting.
But
Okay.
we're treating the work sessions as the information session of the policy. So the next board meeting, they would be for action
Correct.
Next month or?
March.
next month. Yes.
March, I think it's 12th. Okay, the next portion of this, and probably the rest of this portion, I'm gonna turn it over to Mr. Hagler, and he's gonna go through the documents that were provided for his presentation.
Was there some just not added? I mean, that's kind of very close, but-
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Were there more? I only remember seeing 2 last night. Were there 4 last night? On these?
Are you talking about the documents?
Yes, ma'am.
Some were added today.
I
Yes.
thought so.
There's much more in the stack than there were in the,
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Hard copy should be included in, at your side there too. The ones that were added, we also put them at your side there.
Okay, thank you.
It's easier to reference maybe on paper than scrolling through.
Yeah.
amen.
All right. Well, good afternoon. First I'll say, the staff made me do a script, so. But I have 30 pages. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, so. I usually don't do that, but I'm gonna try to do that today, so I cover everything and I don't miss anything, but I don't run on also.
Very off script, Randy.
I got two people on my side to elbow me. We'll be reviewing several items related to our budget this afternoon. Details on how the state budget and funding formulas impact our budget. We're gonna review projections in light of state reversion funding ending in FY 28-29. We'll review non-personnel related expenditures. We'll review the budget considerations for next year. Also staffing standards impact on elementary schools and overall staffing standards. If we don't get to them all, we might need to schedule additional, but it's quite a bit we're gonna try to get through today, so we'll see what we can do. Before I start, I'll just give you some updates on the state budget. Their General Assembly is in session right now. February 22nd is called Budget Sunday. That's when the budget committees present their proposals to their respective chambers. February 26th, which is our next work session on budget, is the deadline for each chamber to act on the budget proposal. March 4th, the General Assembly appoints conferees from each chamber to come up with a single budget. March 9th, deadline for committee action on all bills. And March 14th, the General Assembly adjournment. So the Department of Education, just a side note here, will send out revenue worksheets to me once the 2 houses take action. I don't know when I'm gonna receive those. So on the February 26th date, we'll do the best we can to estimate what the changes are to the budget from what the governor originally proposed. If some of the things in there are a little bit too complex or are brand new where I don't know how to calculate it, we may have to change that date. So just an FYI on that, if I don't have those calculations or I cannot do estimates, we might postpone that because we need accurate revenue numbers from the state. So we'll go to page 1 of the document that we handed out, state funding, and we're gonna go through a review of the local composite index. I'll refer to that as the LCI going forward. The state evaluates and recomputes the LCI every 2 years. They use, to calculate, they use true property values, not discounted values, sales tax and income tax to compute the LCI. The chart on page 1 displays the LCI history going back to 2014 for Bedford County Schools. The bottom line, I would say, as you look at that LCI going up, the bottom line is that the state views Bedford as gaining in wealth. The higher the LCI, the richer your district is perceived. I'll explain how that impacts our budget when we get into the state funding. Based upon the current state budget for this year, every 0.01 or 1% change in the LCI changes our funding from the state by $730,000. So plus or minus. If it went down, more money. If it went up, the LCI goes up, less money from the state. From 2014 to 2026, there has been about a $3.5 million reduction in our state funding because of the LCI increase. However, because of reversion, this impact has been postponed. The full impact we'll see the effect of the full impact of that in 28-29 when the reversion funding ends. I will make a note here, some questions back from some board members. We're already feeling the impact of this. It's not going to only be in 28-29 since we are setting aside funds for reversion into the maintenance reserve fund. We are diverting funds that we could have used for operating, raises, programs, other types of things that we can't spend in that operating fund. So we are feeling the effect of that right now and will continue to do so. But the full effect of it from the state will be realized in 28-29. The next chart on that first page shows our ranking compared to other districts. So when you look at that, I have Bedford highlighted. The state views Bedford as the 37th richest district in Virginia. So keep that in mind. I'm going to come back to that later. But as the ranking goes, we're 37th in the entire state out of 131 districts as far as wealth. And I'm going to stop. I'm going to cover a lot. A lot of this is going to build on each other, but I'll try to stop at each page and see if there's any questions about the LCI and what the state's doing. There's a lot of other numbers behind this, but this is kind of the basics of it. So realistically, the LCI has been going up and the state's been cutting us funding. That's the bottom line. Go to page 2 and continue with this. How does the LCI impact our budget? Well, the state takes the standards of quality, which are by law, and how schools should operate. And most of the funding that comes to us in the standards of quality is based upon student enrollment. So remember that, what's our total student enrollment for the division? The state does not give us any funding for any positions above the SOQ. So if we have any positions above the SOQ, that's 100% locally funded. We get no state money. The state then projects the sales tax for our district. The General Assembly usually makes amendments to the caboose bill. The caboose bill is what they're picking up right now for the current year budget. And they make revenue adjustments to true up to what's actually happening. So if sales tax was coming in lighter, they would reflect that and we would get more basic aid. If it was coming in a lot more, they would reduce our basic aid. So there's kind of like a matching to what's actually happening out there. I also watch this throughout the year and give quarterly updates to the board that if we had any revenue shortfalls in sales tax or any other area, I would brief the board very quickly and then we could decide what we need to do about a revenue shortfall in any given year. The formula applied, so I'm going to give you the formula here. It's the SOQ calculated what it costs. The state tells us it costs to run the school district. Subtract the sales tax, multiply that times 1 minus the LCI. The LCI is our portion, the rest is the state's. So they're taking total cost for what they consider the cost for running this, the division minus sales tax, and then they pick up their portion. of that, which is 1 minus the LCI. If not for reversion, which we'll discuss shortly later on, the state would be paying about 54% of the SOQ costs right now for us. And we'd be picking up the rest of it. Okay. The state funds are based upon students. I'm gonna make a comment here, just so everybody knows. The state funds are based upon students, not buildings. Thus, small schools do not receive additional funding because of any inefficiencies. So I just want to let the board in that. The state doesn't recognize inefficiencies. They say, here's the amount per students. If we have 21 schools or 42 schools, you get the same amount. It doesn't matter. So that does impact our budget when it comes down to buildings. The state funds are based upon student, and also, as an example of this, I'll give this as an example. We currently, the state recognizes six assistant principals division-wide for us. Think about all of our schools, they only recognize 6. We have 16. The extra 10 is 100% locally funded. The state gives us no funding for that. That is across the board where there's a lot of things that we have more staff for than the state recognizes. As our LCI increases, I also say you hear that sometimes as ability to pay when the state refers to that. The LCI increases or ability to pay increases, then the state cuts their funding. The state is communicating that the locality should raise the funding to offset the state decrease. That's what they're communicating when they do that. I do present the state worksheet below. It's on page 2 and on page 3. The section on page 2 is really covering the SOQ part of the state funding. These line items are directly affected by the LCI in that computation I gave. And you can see they have different things in which they fund through that. When you go to page 3, there's other sections on there that are incentive, categorical, and lottery funding. Some of those have an LCI component, but most of them do not. They are computed on different measurements, not with the LCI impacting those. So if the LCI changes, those numbers don't change year over year. The LCI on the worksheet is currently set to 0.3132, which was Bedford City's LCI prior to reversion. So the state has artificially kept our LCI at 0.3132, which is a lot lower than the actual. This will go away in 28-29. That's the reversion funding gap we'll be talking about. When you look at the worksheet there, you have several different columns for each of the biennium years. There's a column that says here's the state funding, and then the other column is what is the required match from the locality? What does the locality have to put in to the school district because there's that required match? The SOQ requires local match by law. From the state worksheet above, you can see that the required local contribution is $27.4 million for operating in our textbook funds. Current actual local funding is $34.3. The additional $5 million in local funding is paying for positions above the SOQ, positions recognized above the support positions recognized by the state, programs not recognized by the state, for instance, all sporting, we don't get funding for that, and unfunded mandates. So that's what that additional funding is going for. The General Assembly authorized JLARC, a research arm of the General Assembly, to conduct a study on how the state is funding schools. The study showed that the state is not recognizing about $3.5 billion actually being spent by the schools compared to what they say the school should be funding. There is a big difference there, and there's a big gap, and JLARC said that that needed to be addressed. The General Assembly addressed a little bit of that in the current budget, maybe about 400,000, but the other $3 billion or more has not been addressed by the General Assembly yet. Another example is this: the state recognizes that we have 5 aides throughout our division. For all of our schools, we currently have 38. This does not include special ed aides. This is just how we have our staffing standards for our schools at this point. So there's a big discrepancy in what they recognize and what we're doing. Another example is school resource officers. There's no funding from the state. I will say that they did have a competitive grant that we were able to use that helped, but this is not reoccurring funds and not guaranteed. But there is no reoccurring stream of money to help pay for SROs in the state budget. I will add, there was one page added. I'll hold that up. This page was not in your original packet, but I added that today. That's an analysis of the current year to give you an idea of what we are doing. What positions do we have more than what the state recognizes? I'm not gonna go over all those are for your review. If you have any questions, you can ask me about those. But across the board in our schools, we have quite a bit more funding than the state even recognizes. That's that 3.5 billion statewide gap. There's only one area that we do not have as many as the state said we should have, and that's at the central office. We have 23 less positions in the central office than the state recognizes. Those are not standards of quality, those are support positions, so that's not mandated by law, but the SOQ are mandated by law. We cannot go below that. There's also some state funding that comes that isn't really tied to positions, but it helps us. I put those at the bottom. And so my analysis is almost $7.5 million is going towards positions over the SOQ and what the state recognizes for Bedford County schools. I'll take a moment and pause. Been through a lot on that, so I'll pause at that point before going on to some comparison data for any questions. Yes, ma'am.
So you said the General Assembly is not yet addressed. Are they planning to address? Do you know what?
I think they hope to. We'll see what happens in this budget cycle. There's bills that have been introduced. There's a lot of budget talk in Richmond. I would say that the original governor's proposed biennial budget, that was the outgoing governor, did not address that funding gap really at all. So maybe the General Assembly is gonna pick that up and make some headway on that. So
there should be some kind of compensation for the bigger counties that have a lot further to go. I mean, you can't bus kids.
there's a lot of
for an hour and a
things.
half to get into it.
You know, when you look at smaller districts and counties, there's inherent inefficiencies where it's harder, you know, smaller schools and different things that you've got to do certain things, and it's like you spread that over 1,000 kids to 100,000 kids in a Fairfax. You know, it just produces inefficiencies for smaller districts. They recognize that, so there is talk about that. I think Mr. Hill has talked to me that trying to get something through saying, we got a large area mass. And so transportation, if you apply the same metric for transportation to everybody, it's a lot easier for Lynchburg City than it is for us. We gotta go further. There's a lot more, unless you have kids on the bus for 2 hours, and I don't know if anybody wants to do that. So there are those built-in things. I think that's recognized. How that's addressed, I'm not sure. So we'll continue to watch this. We have different associations watching this. They keep bringing it to the General Assembly. Back when the recession, I'm going off script, sorry. Back when the recession hit in 2009-10, they put a artificial cap on the support positions and just said, you don't need those. And that was in place until like last year. So you're talking from 2009, 10, and 11, when the recession hit, all the way till last year, there was a artificial support cap where they just eliminated a whole bunch of custodians and clerical workers. And said, you don't need them. Everybody kept them, but the state just didn't fund them. So they did a little bit in the last 2 years to try to regain that, but there's still a lot of work to do.
We tried to push something through with Delegate Griffin earlier this year, myself and the IGA, and it was dead on arrival. There was really nothing we could push through, because what we were really trying to push through is to get additional funding for longer bus routes.
Rural
You know, I was
transportation.
really looking for about $130,000 in additional money. Could probably buy, correct me if I'm wrong, Randy, about 2 buses.
Mhm.
And it didn't get anywhere. Unfortunately, also our delegates that represent our area are not on the education committees. And so that kind of hurts us as well. And just the state that we're in, we don't have much of a shot right now of getting what we want pushed through unless we're able to group a lot of rural counties together and say, hey,
That would be a good idea.
and you know, that's a lot of legwork, you know. So we're hoping to begin that legwork now for next year, but this year we were too late to the ballgame on it.
I will say at the state level, when you talk about, and there's been some talk about redoing the LCI. My caution there is, unless you increase the overall pie for public education and redo that, where everybody gets more, it's an allocation model. So if you redo the methodology on that calculation, we could win or lose. It depends on who has the political power in Richmond, Cause if you think about a Fairfax, they're only getting 20% funding from the state, 80% is coming locally. They're maxed out at 80. So they're going, a lot of our tax dollars are going somewhere else. So you gotta be careful when you go, you get what you wish for, it might not be what you wanted. So I don't know if we would come out on the winning side or losing side of that. There's a lot of looking at that or changing up the funding on how you do this overall and getting rid of that. I don't know what that means long-term, but they know there's this discrepancy. It's been documented. It's just addressing it when they have funds. I think they might have done more this year, but I think the Medicare and Medicaid deficit really took up a lot of the money of the General Assembly.
And we're in a unique position in Bedford County to where we are a mostly rural district. We're a very large county, but we're also considered one of the more affluent counties. And so we're kind of in one of those, we're not really on any team, so we're kind of losing all around.
A big argument there also when I said that they look at the LCI of true property values, that's the assessed value. There's a lot of agricultural land in Bedford County where you get a discount and you don't pay the actual assessed value, but a reduced. The state doesn't recognize that. They use the actual assessed value. So you're not collecting taxes on the assessed value, but a discounted value. The state says you can do that, but we're not recognizing that. So there's been talk about that in Richmond to allow us to recognize that, but I don't think that got anywhere this year either. So
I do have a question.
Yes,
Mr. Agner. So based on the state SOQ recognized value versus our actual, just looking purely at the numbers,
Yep.
the state believes that we should have 2 less schools open. Is that pretty much what I'm picking up from the state SOQs?
based upon principles,
Well, based on principals, librarians, guidance counselors, I mean, if you were to knock down two schools out of every one of them, those numbers would line up
yeah.
closely with the state SOQs.
Yeah, I would say this also, and just, I'll be careful, but that's my job is to inform you all. I'm not recommending this, but hope, if it gets out there that I'm not. But having very small high schools with the numbers we have in there is very costly. I mean, when you get down in the 600s, and you have two of them in that range, state's looking at it going, you should have a high school that's, in the 1,500 to 2,000 area and stuff like that. So those can become very expensive for the support. The teachers go where the kids are. It's the support. More, clerical staff is duplicated, librarian, nurse, guidance counselors, everything. But we're a big area mass. How do you do that? And you're doing the auditorium. So, I don't see there's any option there, but it does cost more to do that. That's the bottom line. And that's just the reality of it. And the state doesn't really, good for, you have to have that because you're area mass. We'll give you more. We don't get it.
You gotta get faster buses.
Star Trek, beam them in, something like that. So, but that's hard for me to say, but that's the reality, and it needs to be said. So, any other questions on that funding? I'll continue to watch the state funding. Once I get those worksheets, I'll brief the board on what the General Assembly actually accomplished this year. I am hopeful for more than what the governor originally proposed from what I've seen. I just don't know how much, and sometimes it comes with strings. You can't spend it the way you want it, you gotta spend it here. So we have to watch that.
I did have one question.
Yeah.
I know probably been answered a million times, but I seen where it's, the LCI stayed the same for 3 school years in a row.
Well, it's remarkable. It was exactly the same number for the last biennium, and I said, how can that be? And I actually went into the calculations and was like, okay, property went up, but things changed and ours came out the exact same. I don't know, the probability of that I didn't think was possible, but it was all different numbers in the calculations. I'm really shocked it stayed the same, but in that sense, it didn't go up, so it didn't put an additional burden on us.
Yeah.
If you flip to the next page, on the 4th page, I give some comparison data in regards to our number of our students, our actual LCI, not the artificial lower one for reversion, our per pupil funding for local funds only, and our per pupil funding local and state combined. Make a note here, this per pupil funding is for operations, which is our basically our operating fund and our textbook fund. It does not include debt service or capital improvements. So this is just looking at really daily operations. I tell you to focus really on the state and local combined, because the local one is kind of skewed right now. These are on state reports that I get because of the reversion. It's kind of showing it a little bit worse than it is. It would probably be a little bit better once that funding comes over. So focus over there on the state and the local combined per pupil. And I guess I would draw your focus on this. I mentioned earlier that the state sees us as the number 37th wealthiest district in Virginia. Our per pupil funding, we're 118th out of 131. So, and Dr. Calvert's going to be presenting later tonight on our strategic plan. And that 118th kind of correlates where our teacher pay is. We're 111th on teacher pay in the state. So I think there's a direct correlation there. What you can, expound from that, I'm just showing comparative data, that's factual data, and how we compare. State sees us as 37th, but we're really funding state and local combined as 118th. So I'll take a pause there and see if there's any questions you have on that.
Yes, so Amherst is 70th. They have a whole lot lower LCI than we do. So does it benefit us? Because evidently the state's not making up exactly the same.
When you look at state and local combined, you're saying, you're excluding federal funds,
Right.
grants. And you just say state and local combined is the biggest portion of what's driving the divisions. So whether you have a lower or higher LCI, you put everything together, it's saying how you're running your division compared to everybody else. That's the best comparison, I would say. So I wouldn't say the lower the LCI, the more money you get from the state. The higher, the less money you get from the state. And as I said, some of the Northern Virginia,
And it evens out, or it's supposed to, because it's not.
you could theorize that it should, but it's not for us.
Yeah.
So, and that's, just the data as it is. You would think you would be closer, it wouldn't be exact, but it depends on how each locality funds the school systems. That's what's making this difference.
So if it was a lower from the locality,
I'll just put it this way,
It's gonna be more.
if there was more money from the locality, our funding would be higher, we'd be closer to that 37th ranking on the LCI. Yeah. Not passing blame and just showing the realities of where we are. Each locality has its own issues and complexities that they've got to meet and budget for. But when you look at, if you look at the LCI for Amherst, they're ranked 97th, richest, but they're funding at 70th. They're funding way better than what their LCI says. So that means there's probably more local money going in to get them even doing better, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Does that help explain how that's working?
yeah, I got you.
So you can draw comparisons down the line on that. There are surrounding counties. We put Augusta in there because that's who we compare with mostly when people are comparing us to the same size, same number of schools, same kind of demographics.
Gotcha.
So the reason we have a higher ranking in the state and local for 118 is because, it's not because we have, because it's based on the price per student, and you're saying, or the cost per student,
Yep,
correct?
cost per student.
And you're saying that the reason we have it so low is not because of, is because of our teacher pay, is that the
Not
direct
teacher pay, it's just overall budget. And the operating in the textbook fund budget is just, you take those line items and those accounts all together, whether it's pay or anything you're using, put all that money together, divide by the number of students, and that's what you're spending.
Oh, we've got pretty tight belt
Um,
spending.
So the discrepancy between 37 and the 118 is local funding.
yes, sir.
That's what makes the difference.
And the reason I say look out to the right, because with reversion, we're getting more state and less local has to come in right now. But theoretically, if that weren't here, it would reverse. It's going to reverse. You put them together anyway, it doesn't change that 118. Either get it from state or local, it both gets combined. So that, we're still gonna be at 118 with or without reversion money. That's the way I look at this.
So to stay where we are, when the reversion comes, we're gonna have to have more local funding.
I'll talk about reversion here
in order
as we get closer.
to
Yeah.
keep us this in sync.
That's coming up. Just wanted to pause there and make sure I answered those questions and got that. Any other questions on that page? All right, reversion, I've been updating the board on reversion, because of the significance of it in the last, almost every budget cycle. But I'm gonna brief, some new board members and go through this. I'm getting back to my script, okay? There's a plan presented here to offset the state reduction in funding once reversion ends in FY 28-29. Each year, the first $500,000 of new revenue for the school system is set aside for capital projects each year. That means it does not flow into the operating fund for any of our ongoing operations to offset reversion in the future. Well, the 500,000 wasn't gonna get us to where we needed to by the time of reversion, so several boards back, we started putting 200, then another 600, and we started putting additional money to get to that, to lessen that gap in the future. So the school system has also been setting aside an additional 600,000 in the same way as the 500. So if you think about that, almost 1.1 million of any new local funding is going towards reversion, not for operations. That money's being put into a capital improvement fund. We can spend that money on capital improvement, but it's not helping us with our day-to-day operations for the current budget. By FY 28-29, under the current plan, we'll have about $8.8 million that have been set aside year over year ongoing. That's recurring money that can offset, my estimated is $10.3 million difference, once reversion ends. That's based upon the 26 budget. I'll do a recompute when we get the 27 budget done. I expect that number to go up. Not because the LCI could force it up in 2 years, but because the state's gonna give us more money, so that drives that difference up. So I do expect that 10.3 to increase, I just don't know how much. So I'll recalculate that and present that when we do our budget cycle here in the next month or two. If all the 8.8 million projected set aside moves over to the operating fund when reversion ends, so we're putting this aside, we have 8.8 million recurring funds that we've been setting aside. Theoretically, this is what you're gonna do is when you get to reversion end, you take that 8.8 million locally, move it over to the operating fund, and the state cuts you the 10.3. Now, there's a shortfall there, we'll talk about that in a minute. What options do you have? This will cause a problem in that all that money that was going into the maintenance reserve, of which these two members have been helping us spend that money on things greatly needed, the maintenance reserve will go down to zero. We have no money for capital improvements long term. I don't think that's acceptable. I know the board doesn't think that. So we got to come up with a plan to fully fund that eventually. What are the options? You can increase the funding set aside over the next few years to put more set aside into the maintenance reserve. So when you get to reversion, you can leave some money in there. That will decrease the amount you have for operations right now. So not great, but that's one option. When you get to reversion, you don't have to move the entire amount out. You can move some of it and leave some in the maintenance reserve, so you have some seed money in there to do some things. Once again, that would hurt your operating budget when you do that at the end of reversion. Option 3 is, let's see what the budget is in 28-29 and not deal with it right now. I would recommend when we get there, we need to have some money in there, at least contingency money, but my estimates, working with the two members on the maintenance committee, is that with life cycles as they are, we need about 5 million going in there each and every year for proper replacement of our equipment. When we look at HVAC lasting 25s, roofs 30, I've calculated all that, and 21 schools and central office, we need about 5 million going in there each and every year. So that's gonna have to be addressed. I don't have a crystal ball to say how to fix that right now. That's not gonna be easy fixed. I don't think you can fix it in 1 year, because you'd have to take 5 million out of your operating fund to fix it immediately, and that would be catastrophic to what we're doing in the schools.
And to add to what he says there, I think that 5 million is maintaining bare minimum of keeping our facilities open and safe and acceptable.
That doesn't include renovation, add-ons, that's just the major equipment, and that is probably with today's dollars.
Yeah.
So
No emergency.
inflation and things like that, that's gonna have to be looked at in the future, but that's kind of using things in current dollars. And so there's work to be done there. I don't know how to get there I don't think you can get there immediately. It's too big of a hill, but you can build up to it, I think, is what we're gonna have to do. But that'll be for the board to decide. But those are some options. To compound that, current calculation is there's a 1.5 million shortfall. If you wanted to fund everything we're doing now after reversion, this plan only comes up with 8.8 instead of 10.3, and it might get a little bit larger. What are your options there? Increase funding right now to set aside for capital projects so you have the money to move over, but that would limit how much you could put into your operating fund this year to do anything you want to do in this year's budget. Or you wait to 28, 29, and see what you got. So I hate to say that, but that is an option, and that I think people would say that's kicking the can down the road and saying, we'll deal with it then. But that is an option, and so I think all these things we've got to struggle with, and it's big money that we've got to deal with. So on the bright side, because of this plan, when you add all the money that we've been putting aside, we will have put $37 million into capital improvements over this plan that the maintenance committee and staff have been able to do. That's a lot of projects with cash, no borrowing. Most of those HVACs, roofs, and things like that. So that's good that this was done, but then we gotta, how do you reseed that money in the future? So I'll pause there, see if there's any questions. I know it's kind of complex, but trying to give you your options and paint a picture of what we're facing.
Well, they want pretty good options. Sorry.
So, yeah, I mean, the hard part, when you go back before, when we first started reverse in 2014, the spread was $6 million. It's now 10.3 because of the LCI. It's just, but no one has really seen it because it's like in the future. But it is gonna hit 28, 29. And I don't think the state's gonna give us any grace. And you wanna go up there and ask them to continue reversion, that'd be fine, but I don't think they're gonna give it to us, so. So that's a picture on the reversion funding. Okay, if you go to the next page, I think we're on page 6. I think one of the board members asked for, when you look at our budget line items, there's probably 6,000 or 7,000 line items in the budget, kind of hard to find anything. So I kind of bunched them together as best I could so you all could look at them. And I excluded all I didn't include salaries or fringes. That's kind of staffing related. I put everything that's non-salary or fringe within our operating budget and broke them down kind of by different categories. You can see on the left side, there's grants. Grants are the revenue and the expenditures match. Not much you can do to balance a budget there. It's one for one. Special education, there's some have-tos in special education and a lot of legislation that we cannot reduce funding and you gotta maintain. So there's not much you can do in special education to balance a budget. Utilities, leases, and insurance, those are kind of givens. Not much you can do there. Not saying you can't do anything, but it's kind of hard. On the right side, you'll see budget categories in instruction and operations. There are line items behind these, so there might be 4 or 5 line items that support each one of these lines behind the scenes. But I wanted to give this to the board to say, in our overall budget, these are things that are non-salary related that we're spending money on. A lot of the things on the right-hand side and left-hand side, we really got to do if you're going to have, public education. But I'll open it up to the board if there's any questions about these. If you look through these and you have a question between now and the 26th, be happy to answer those. Staff is prepared as best they can to answer some of the questions on this, so I'll turn it over to the board to see if there's any questions on these line items.
Going forward, it's like the maintenance, insurance, transportation insurance, school board insurance. I'm assuming we're constantly checking that or kind of.
We don't go out for bid. We're part of a pool, part of VACORP pool. I'd say they have almost all the counties and schools. They don't have 100%, but they have a lot. And so we're part of an insurance pool and they look at their losses. And so we're part of that. I have not bid that out.
Is there any, yeah, so we could, but.
Yeah, the pool is, I guess we could. I could take a look at it, but I'm not
I'm
sure
wondering
what
if there
we'd
would be
get.
any kind of savings there, I mean.
Yeah.
I know, cause I mean, I try to switch vehicle insurance every 6 to 8 months. And say it's a tremendous
We
amount of
do,
money.
we do get, not everybody gets the same rate, depends on what we're experiencing and stuff, and so each division. But they maintain the, you know, a pool, and so if you think about it with a school and insurance covering a school district, back when we had a lot of snow back in 2010 or 11, you know, when Blacksburg roof collapsed, well, that insurance company had to build a new school. So there's exposure there for whatever insurance is gonna take, because you have to have the money set aside for our school to be closed down because something happens. So there's a lot of risk there. I can take a look at it, but almost everybody's in that pooled insurance pool.
Yeah, that's what kinda makes me leery about it, to be honest. Everybody's in it. I mean, I don't know. I'm just thinking, I know it's not a tremendous amount of money, but and I guess the bus lease, we're getting out of that slowly.
Yeah, that will continue. So when you look at the bus lease, that includes the replacement cycle. So for new board members, we used to lease our buses. We would buy, it's a lease purchase. So we would lease them over 7 years, run them for 15. We would lease them. We were having interest rates in the 1.8, 2, so it made sense. And the interest rate went up and we said, let's switch out of that and start buying them. So we went down to buying 2, bought 4 this year, gonna buy 6 next year. Eventually, the leases will go away and we'll save all that interest, but not until the last lease is paid off.
Right.
And they were 7-year leases. So we got another 4 years and then we'll see the true savings.
Okay.
But we need to maintain our fleet, probably 10 or 11 buses a year. If you don't maintain your fleet, and you stop doing that, you're gonna get into a hole very quickly.
What about buying some used buses? I mean, have we looked into that? Cause I know like Botetourt County and stuff was doing that. I mean, some of their buses are right old, but they're maintained. I
Yeah.
mean, they're just,
Well, we keep about 30 buses in reserve because breakdowns, accidents and stuff, when we have to do that. Depends on who you're buying from. I don't know who would be selling a bus until they get to 15 years. It makes sense to run it 15 years based upon what the state. Our bus garage also rotates the buses, so if one has a very short run, it'll be put on a long run later, and the long runs are put on the short run. So we're managing the mileage on our buses by rotating them through our fleet. So they all end up with about the same mileage at 15 years.
right.
So I don't know who
Yeah, I
would
don't
be
know.
selling
It's just-
buses that are, you know, less than 15 or without a lot of mileage.
Yeah.
I'm just being honest.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just asking.
I'll look into insurance, ask some questions and see.
Randy, I know that you were also talking about, you were also talking about health insurance and trying to partner with the city and other places to reduce the cost of health insurance.
Kind of partnering, I'm gonna get into health insurance, partnering with the, you mean with the county?
Yeah, with
Yeah.
the police department, sheriff's department, oh, yeah.
The health insurance is, and I'll brief the board on that, when I was gonna get to the next sheet, but I'll go ahead and address that now. We are self-funded in our health insurance. If somebody were gonna bid on a fully insured, they'd look at our claims. I'll say this right now, our claims, for this year, the last 12 months is running at 122% of budget. That's not good. We're spending more than we're bringing in right now, and that has been on a 3-year cycle. We had reserves built up in the self-insured fund to the tune of almost 6 million. I'm below 2 million right now. We've seen 4 million flow out of that fund in the last 3 years. I was hoping it was a bad year, because once in a while you have a bad year and you pay out a lot and you catch it up. So we have postponed probably going up on our insurance rates as drastically as we needed to, because it was like, is it a bad year or is it inflation? It's inflation. We are spending about $400,000 to $450,000 a month on prescription drugs. We're gonna have to go up substantially on our budget, on our insurance this year. On my next document, I had 17 projected, we're probably gonna go up near 30. Our consultants are looking at how we can bring that down, so I'll have a better number when I present to the board on the 26th or the next time we meet. But the health insurance is, we've taken a drastic hit, and so you gotta pay the claims. So if somebody were gonna come bid on us, they'd say, what's your claims history? And they're gonna charge you what you're spending. You may get an insurance firm to come in 1 year and say, let's lowball it so I can get your business, but they're gonna get it back the next year. That's what insurance companies do. The benefit of being self-insured, I'll be honest with you, yes, it's hard in these years, but in all those years that we did better, we banked all that money and we put it in reserve. We kept it. It didn't go to an insurance company. So I still believe in self-insurance, but we're gonna have to address our premiums and our rates. And that's gonna be a drastic hit this year, both on employees and on the school board budget. So more on that later, but I wanted to brief you on that. I don't see a magic get out of jail on this one, because they do look at the claims and what you're experiencing, and you gotta collect enough money to pay the claims. And that's,
Well, now, I know the president had done something with the pharmaceutical companies and reduced the, is that,
what
is
he,
that it yet, or is it?
yeah, what he's rolled out is called Trump RX.
It's mostly weight loss
It's
drugs.
very similar to Good RX and actually collaborates with that a little bit from my research. It has 48 drugs on the list right now. Those are not part of insurance, anybody can access. Our employees could go look at Trump RX, Good RX, and our employees, and we instruct our employees to shop around. So it's like when you go to Walmart, present your pharmacy card, you can go to Walmart and say, does Walmart have that $5 on that drug? So we encourage our employees to shop around, because you don't always have to use your prescription drug, you could get it cheaper other ways. There's coupons and everything, so we're constantly trying to instruct our employees to shop, do the best they can, get the drugs they needed to maintain whatever condition they have, but to do a little bit of shopping and being
Is
a
that
consumer.
something we can require them to do?
Our pharmaceutical PBM, actually has formularies, but also, requirements that when the card's presented, there are certain drugs that the employee has to take. If they wanna take one that's different, there's a process that their doctor can go through to get that, but you almost have to prove that you can't take this drug, you gotta take this drug. So there's a lot of that going on behind the scenes.
No.
I'm not really crazy about all that, but, it's kind of how that market has developed and worked, unfortunately. But, I've seen the biggest increase in our drug spend, not on our medical spend over the last 3 years. And so we're gonna have to address it. So we got that information this week. Kind of a shock. Lane
So it wasn't
Calvert,
an
Dr.
increase.
Calvert was in the room when we got that, and I basically just wanted to go home. But, we're gonna have to work through that. Yes, sir.
So it really wasn't an increase in claims, just the price of or was it?
It's claims. It's what we're
An
paying.
increase of
claims.
claims as well as the price of
There's
prescription.
just a couple really
That
expensive-
and also if you went to the doctor 5 years ago, I mean, I think I look back and we would tell people to go for their wellness visit. At one time it was like about $85 or something like that to go to the doctor. I can go look at my last bill and it's probably $125, $130 now for a visit or something. So it's just overall inflation. You gotta collect the premiums to pay those. So it's both, but the prescriptions has
The
been
biggest.
increasing
driver.
quicker than the medical. Yes, sir. I went way off script here, I'm sorry. But,
That's all right. A
You know-
little whiffs of steam coming out of your ears too.
well, no, well, I'm not saying no, but, I just told you about reversion. I told you about the LCI and now this, and you're going, okay, is there good news? Hopefully you get some good news from the state. I'll let you know, but I'm waiting for the good news too. But I need to paint the picture for the board what we're dealing with. That's my job, so. Merging with the county, we are trying to get our plans aligned, Ms. Purvis. But when you merge two different groups, it gets difficult because there's always a winner and loser. And you gotta blend that. So in order for us to blend with the county, even though we're having a such high increase this year, for the exact same plan that most of our employees have, theirs costs about $150 more. So even though we're taking a hit this year, their plan's a lot more, they have to pay a lot more for their employees. They're a smaller employer with a lot less employees, more fluctuation. It would behoove them to come on together with us. But if we blend, we almost have to go up on our rates. They come down. So then you gotta go to the Board of Supervisors and say, because of that, give us more money to offset this. And so that gets complicated. I don't know if everybody's gonna understand that, so I don't know if it's an easy sell. But overall, we are trying to get closer together and working with administration at the county. It's just complicated when you blend, and how do you do that, and budgetary wise. And I'm not blaming anybody on that, it just gets complicated to make sure the budget comes out right. But we are trying to blend.
Sorry to get you off script. I'm good at that though.
I'm good at it too, so. If you want, you've got those things. If you have any questions on any of those line items, please feel free to send me an email and I can give you more details on that. But we constantly look at those to see if there's any potential cost savings and reductions every year when we go through the budget, from a staff perspective. Okay, I'm nearing the end of my part. If we go to the last page, I think all the board members have seen this. Mr. Rivera sent this out to you for consideration. I will say, these are estimates. These are just for discussion and to think about. These estimates will change as we get more information. I've already spoke about the one on health insurance there. That's gonna change. And then when you look at the increase in pay, that was a 3%. That's what the state did the last 2 years. The governor came out with 2%, but I'm hearing other things from the state. That number's gonna change too. But theoretically, here are some discussion and how do the board members think what they want to accomplish here. I would say the have-tos, why are there two different categories? I would put the have-tos as this. These are, there would be a significant detriment to the division if we didn't implement these. That's how I would say the have-tos are. The needs are items identified to function at our current level and improve our areas identified in our strategic framework. So if we want to get better, and we want to operate where we are, and we want to get better in certain areas identified in our strategic framework, these needs are identified. We had a wants, there's no wants on here. We got enough to accomplish with what we're identifying here. And these are things that we really need to do. See if I covered everything here. So at this point, I think you've seen these, you've responded to the superintendent on this, on priorities and stuff. Be happy to answer any questions on this, but I think there's already been a lot of traffic back and forth about questions on this and supporting these. So I'll be happy, the staff will be happy to answer any questions on these if you have those.
I guess my question is, obviously this entire list is not gonna be able to happen. Realistically, what are we looking like as far as, I mean, I would even throw the needs that you put down in here as wants. I don't know that we'll be able to have the funds to do that. How much do we really have to attack any of these issues when we're looking at, the overall budget coming in? And obviously you don't have the actual number. And so this is all just kind of estimating.
There's a lot of estimating. I think the state budget is the biggest unknown, so it's hard to tell.
That's right.
Because, when you build in some of these things, how much funding from the state is discretionary, means I can use it anywhere in the budget, and how much is like pinpointed, you can only use it here. I think it's too early to tell. Can you accomplish all these issues? No. I mean, you add all these up, the 5 million, the 2.7. But I think as a board, when you look at this, you go, what are the non-negotiables? And when I think the superintendent's looking through that, and he'll present a budget to the board, his recommended budget, and then the board will pick it up and make changes. What are the non-negotiables? That means we're gonna go ask for this. If we don't get it, these are not being cut, we're gonna cut somewhere else. And that might not be pleasant, but you gotta balance the budget anyway. So most of the money's tied up in staffing. To balance a budget is usually in staffing or pay. I mean, I'm just being honest. You see that other list out of $130 million, you're talking very little that you can like maneuver on there. So I understand your question. It's too early to tell, sir. Because if I throw out a number now, then that sticks and everybody's talking about it, and it could be $2 million difference in 10 days.
Yep, I
And I'm
have
worried that-
a list that has 6 of the 7 replies. And if you start talking about that now, you'll get it in front of us. And so we really do need to wait on the state. If I make it public right now, it kind of defeats the purpose of, is the state gonna come through with more, or is it gonna come through with less? And I think there's some valuable discussions that need to be had in just your replies. And that will be part of the budget process.
Just so
Go ahead.
just so I understand this chart, the have-tos and the needs, those are above and beyond what our budget is now?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So when you
You're
have
gonna
like,
have to ask for this extra money for sure on the have-tos, and then possibly a few of the needs, is that what?
Yes, ma'am.
You're
If
asking.
that's what we do, and we don't know what the increase in state revenue is to offset these things right now. So these are just the expense side. You gotta factor in what revenue you get in from the state. And then you go, okay, this is what we really wanna do. You balance it by saying, this is our ask of increased local funding. I do have one item before I turn it over to Dr. Woodford. I mentioned the SROs earlier. And so the sheriff was notified, or the state just put out this week, that there's an opportunity to go after a competitive grant to extend our current funding for SROs, the 14 SROs that we have, under the current grant for one more year. They asked me if we were okay with that. I said, well, this requires matching funds, evidently from the schools, so I want to get the okay from my board before I commit to anything. So you can do this on a consensus. We are not applying for this. This would be the sheriff. If the board has a consensus to do this, I'll go ahead and give the go-ahead. Look at it, I'd say, look at it this, we have to deal with the SRO issue. We don't know if we're gonna get this funds. We're gonna have to deal with the funding of the SROs in this budget anyway. If we get this money, it would be kind of free up that money, but you can't wait until this, if you get this. I would encourage the board to do this because it is state money that we can get. Why not take it? It would be in next year's, if it comes through, it would be beneficial. And so that would continue under the current condition where it's about 25-75 split. We pay 25, state pays 75%. If I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Hubach, and see if the board has consensus, I'll go ahead and give the okay to the sheriff to proceed after this grant.
Does anybody have any questions about the current SRO situation and where we stand with that funding? Everybody understands that. This really just kind of would, if we got that grant through the sheriff's office, it would kind of freeze where we're at financially now. It doesn't take away our obligation.
Yeah.
when
We'll know about that
grant comes out.
after we finalize our budget. So we need to deal with the SRO fully funding it in our budget or not. Then the grant comes along, it would basically free up money. Yeah. I'll just let you know, the sheriff pursued a grant 4 years ago for 14 SROs and Susie Gibson in all of our elementary schools. The state paid 100% of that in the first year. I don't know if he hired anybody in the first year, it takes time. So
Did not.
we didn't benefit from that money at all from the state. And then it went to a 75-25 split or thereabouts. And that's been the last 3 years. That grant's over, so the full cost of the SROs has to be absorbed by somebody in next year's budget. So we need to deal with that. This grant would say, can we continue to get funding for those 14? We might get zero, we might get it all, we might get a part of that. But the sheriff would go after that, but I think it's state funding, we might as well try. But
Is
I'll
that a
defer to the
1 year?
board. What's that?
Is that a 1 year grant?
It's only 1 year extension, yes, sir.
what is the number of if we're funding it 100%? What's the number? Is it
I estimated about $900,000.
900,000? And just to make sure I'm clear on this, these are SROs are not our employees. They are sheriff's office employees.
Yes, sir.
We just, like you would rent out security force, we are renting.
I will say the sheriff, he outfits, so the cars and uniforms and everything else that's required is outfitted by the sheriff. We only share, the portion I'm talking about, the 900,000 would be for the salary and fringes. And that's not the full cost because the 2 months that we're closed in schools, the sheriff would pick up that work. So it's about a $900,000 from my estimates. I'd get that more from the county. I have to get an estimate on that because that's the proper sharing. We
So
don't
we're
pay for
not-
them in the off months.
We're not paying them on off months.
No, sir.
So basically, if the board gives consensus, we're just saying, yes, go ahead and apply for that grant on our behalf. We'd appreciate it.
I like the board to know when we're obligating matching funds. And so I think caught off guard on the last one, so I was like, I don't wanna let my board worry about this because there is required matching.
From my perspective, there's no reason not to go after this grant because we've already been obligated to those funds, and this actually, like you said, frees up money for a year. So I'd like to give consensus for them to pursue that grant if we're all in agreement. Randy? Yes? Stephen?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
And yes from me. So yes, you have consensus to tell the sheriff to pursue that.
Alrighty, let me check with my assistant here. Did I get everything? Okay. Cause she was checking off as I went, make sure I didn't miss anything. Thank you, Emily. With that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Whitford, and she's gonna talk about our staffing standards impacts on elementary schools.
So I'm going to share this information. It's mostly for informational purposes because it really affects how you make decisions in the future. Dr. Calvert, after this, is going to share all of the staffing standards. What I'm really looking at is our elementary schools and the number of teachers and how we fund them. As Mr. Hagler said, when we're looking at budget deficits or we're trying to find money, most of our money is in staffing. So I put two charts in. It was just one last night, but then I thought I'd do a second visual. So they both look like this. I'm looking first at the top one. Basically, our current staffing standards for elementary teachers are 21 students in classrooms of K-3 and 23 students in grades 4 or 5. Now, to find that standard and assign teachers, we use an averaging model. Therefore, this does not mean that no K-3 classroom can be over 21 or under 21. And it doesn't mean that a 4th or 5th grade class cannot have over 23. Again, I just understanding we apply a formula, and part of that formula is the average of 21 students K-3 and an average of students 4 or 5 of 23 students. So as a reminder, we staff much more favorably than the SOQs require us to. As Mr. Hagler said earlier, and we have that chart where he says, Bedford County is always funded better than the SOQs. So let me just give you an example if we're focused on K-5. Our SOQs state that kindergarten classes can be up to 29 as long as we put a paraprofessional in there. 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade classes can go as high as 30. 4th and 5th grade classes can go up to 35. So please note, everyone, I am not proposing that. I just want to point out that we've done really well in staffing our classrooms well. And I think that's probably why we're number 31 when we look at our performance, because we do better than the SOQs. But that is how we're funded from the state. So it takes a lot of money to fund as generous as we do. So the first page of this projected funding is just a projection of class sizes by grade level for each school. So as an example, you're going to find each grade level listed with an estimated class size and the number of classrooms. So just looking just right here at the top with Bedford Elementary, if I'm looking at the number of students projected in 2nd grade, I'm going to and I'm making projections. If I have 5 classrooms, that's what's in parentheses, that's an average of 19 students per classroom. So I've kind of done that all across. Here is the calculated number of teachers based on our funding formula that the board approved through our staffing standards. You can see that Bedford Elementary has 20 teachers. And so that principal has to really decide, where am I going to put those teachers in my school? I've highlighted in yellow areas that may be concerning for you to consider. So for instance, Big Island Elementary, they could have 29 students in 4th grade, perfectly acceptable in the SOQs. But as an executive team in the summer, we began reviewing the actual numbers. And sometimes we say, golly, 29 is really hard in a fourth grade classroom. And we might look at test scores. We might look at, discipline. We might look at a lot of things. And we may say we need an extra teacher in that classroom, even though it's not part of their funding formula. So Mr. Hagler actually has some teaching positions that he holds on reserve. Those reserve positions we've used every year, and they've always been funded with COVID funds or all in Virginia. We don't have that anymore. So we got to start making some decisions. And basically, as Dr. Calvin and I talk, we're concerned that our staffing standards for elementary are just not working based on the size of some of our elementary schools. You also notice that I highlighted some classes in green because they're concerning in a positive way. As a former teacher, I would love to have a class of, 12 or 13, 10, 11. But that's concerning because you're putting a lot of money in a classroom for 10 students when a larger school may have a class size of 26 because, again, and I'm not proposing one way or another, I'm just giving information. Our smaller schools cost more money because it's more staff for smaller numbers of students. So again, we have those reserve positions, but I think it's time that we really start carefully looking at what do we do instead of additional positions. So I think we could consider classroom size increases. And so the second chart, that's what I've done. I want you to see what could happen if we were to just add one student to our staffing standards. So you'll see down here at the bottom, I adjusted the formula to say K3, an average of 22 students per classroom, 4-5, an average of 24 students. So what does that give us? It cuts us, we can cut 7 positions, which is exactly the number of reserve positions that Mr. Hagler's had to put in the budget to deal with our uneven classrooms. But the other thing you have to look at is now we've got more yellow. So now we've got other classrooms that could become concerning to the board. So when we start thinking about class sizes and we start thinking about changing of staffing standards, I'm not sure that a formula may be, on average, may work the best. So what I would like for my team to really start looking at, and in the past, this has been a concern for the school board, are multi-age classrooms. And I'm not talking about the old-fashioned combo classes of half second graders, half first graders. I'm really thinking of a model where we take maybe a second grade, let's say it's a small school, it has 1 second grade teacher, 1 third grade teacher, maybe putting a para with them. How can they work those children together in flexible spaces? Maybe so that reading groups are smaller, but history is a little bit bigger. So looking at some models like that other school divisions have looked at. The other thing, and this actually came up at a finance meeting as a suggestion, but maybe we offer stipends to experienced teachers who are really okay with taking a higher number of students in their classroom. It's really hard for our new young teachers to come in and have a large class, but we might have some teachers say, hey, I've been doing this a long time. I've got good classroom management. I'm willing for a stipend to have more kids in my class, and if they feel like they can handle it. There are also some new models of where there's a lead teacher who works with a group of young teachers, and they are looking at data. They are responsible. They are in those classrooms every day, and those younger teachers are really looking to them, and the class sizes may be a little bit bigger, but they have someone who has a lot of experience in the classroom rotating with them. So there are lots of models we can look at. One of the things that I would ask is, first of all, is the board thinking that that is an okay way? Can we bring some ideas back? Because the only other thing to do is consider, what are we going to do with our small schools? And it's just like Mr. Hagler said, I'm not proposing anything. I love a small school. My kids are in a small school. But just like our small, middle, and high schools, it costs more money. So if we are concerned about, our future budget, I think we have to start asking ourselves some hard questions. And maybe some of that is multi-age classrooms. Maybe it's just a different way. I think we have to look outside the box and not do school the way we've always done school. And I haven't asked my team, but I'm sure when I tell them tomorrow, they'd be happy to help us kind of come back to you with some ideas of how we can adjust that. So again, this is really for information. I'm not suggesting, I'm not advocating one way or the other. I think the more we work with staffing standards with elementary, we just feel like it may not be working. If we have to reserve 7 or 8 positions to make the classrooms look right, it means something's wrong with our model. With that, I'm going to turn this presentation over to Dr. Calvert. I'm happy to answer any questions before she goes over the rest of the staffing standards that we have in place, but I'm happy to entertain thoughts, comments, questions, now or anytime before the next work session.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
So some of these numbers are really high, and are they taking into account these classrooms that have 8 IEPs and several students with English as a second language?
So sometimes we do. Most of the time we're talking to our principals when we're making those decisions, and that's some of the things they'll call and say to us. This class is getting really high. I'm really concerned. Here are the reasons why. This is on our projected numbers, so it's not actually what we have in the classroom right now. Randy does that enrollment projection. So some of these, as we start seeing kids enroll, we might not have as many kindergartners coming, so it may not be that high. But the answer is yes. When we start looking about 24, 25 kids. That's concerning for us as the 3 of us are looking at staffing. We call the principal, tell us what this class looks like. What are your concerns? Do you have any ideas for how you might want to do your staffing? So we have those discussions in real time when it's happening. Mm-hmm.
We would almost have to add staff wherever there was a yellow.
Yeah,
So
we've
as you can
always,
see, there's
Yeah, you can't have
not
32
enough
kids.
money to do that.
yeah, it's hard.
On the same idea, but on the other end, if there's kids who are gifted in reading or in math, can they be, I don't know, bumped up, but go in, like, let's say you have a 3rd grade class that's way too big, but the 4th grade class is not that big. Can some of the kids who are in that 3rd grade who are maybe more gifted, I don't know if they would be pushed through, but just maybe do some of the core classes, like you said, like math or English with the higher level, and then just do the history and science and
Yeah,
stuff.
that's part of what some of the models that we've looked at. I will tell you, elementary teachers are really good at leveling kids into different reading groups and things like that. So we have a lot of that going on where kids will go up to a different grade level. I think it's also flexibility in the schedule. If, the whole school is doing reading at the same time, you can really start moving your groups around the school. So I think it's just going to take a lot of innovation and looking more deeply. But yes, I do think that's a possibility. Maybe not moving them up a grade level in everything, but, going to a
That's
higher
what I
math
mean.
or reading, yeah.
I mean, I homeschooled my kids when they were in elementary. My son and my daughter, both very smart, but as typical, my son didn't do his work as much as my daughter did. So many of the classes they took together, even though they're 2 years apart. My daughter was younger. She did fine, on some of those things, and she, anyway, I'm just wondering if that's something we can take into consideration.
Alright, staffing standards. Alright, each year when we go into budget, I will bring to you updated staffing standards. There's only a few changes on this. As you see on the first page, testing coordinator 145 day split between 2 schools has been removed. That is due to, we haven't had the testing coordinator role, it hasn't existed only for a few years. And that was really when we had growth assessments. And now growth assessments have been eliminated. The number of SOL tests have been reduced in some grade levels. So we are removing the testing coordinator at the elementary level. As you will see on the next page, on H, there is a reading specialist, 1 full-time, 200 day per school, and this has come into the requirements that we have to do that, so we had to add it. And then J should be struck through, sorry. The testing coordinator, testing coordinator, 1 part-time, 90 day per school enrollment of 750. So what this means is Liberty Middle right now has a 90 day, Forest Middle has a 90 day, and Stanton River Middle has a 90 day. We would be eliminating Liberty Middle and Stanton River Middle's 90 day. We would keep Forest Middle as a 90 day because it's over 750. The high school testing coordinators would remain the same. In the Liberty zone, the high school testing coordinator would also serve the middle school, and in the Stanton River zone, the Stanton River High School testing coordinator would also serve the middle school. The numbers, Liberty High and Liberty Middle still less than JF, and Stanton River is pretty much equal to just JF. So we kind of did it by number. And that eliminated the elementary testing coordinators and 2 middle school testing coordinators. Justin, did I forget anything?
That was it.
Okay. And then there's 2 cross outs on the last 2 pages, instructional aid at Susie Gibson and instructional aid at All Ed. Those don't currently exist. I think they should have been removed previously. We just have special education aides when needed. So if there's any questions, many of you have saw this same document year after year, but if there's any questions about how this is done, these formulas go into Randy's chart, and that's how we allocate staff.
So was the testing coordinator just doing the growth assessments at the elementary level?
They were doing the growth assessments and the SOL testing,
So who's doing the SOL testing?
the librarian. The librarian will, at the elementaries, will do the testing, and there will be a stipend given to the librarian based on the number of students in the school. There's a higher stipend based on if you have a higher number of students.
I will say, the old days of SOL testing where you're hand entering, most of the information comes from our student information system, and it flows right into our testing program. So what our testing coordinators have to do is make sure that's accurate, which I can tell you, I served as the director of all testing last year. It comes over pretty accurate. So we would just be asking everyone to double check that. Assigning the test and printing out the test tickets, and then the teachers run the testing from there. So I think we've gone from where there was just so much hand stuff we were doing with testing, and now it's much more automated. It's made it much more efficient. And we were actually seeing, last year was the first year without growth assessments, and we weren't seeing them working many hours. They were able to get it done within a few hours. And so we feel like going back to the way we used to do it, where we just have somebody in every school who gets a stipend to do.
Even in full swing, they were only working 45 hours. Or 45 days, I'm sorry, 45 days.
Between two elementary schools.
Between two
sometimes
elementary schools. So it was a part-time position.
So what's the stipend, about half as much or less than?
The stipend is, if it's 200 students or less, it's 500. If it's from 200 to 400 students, it's 750. And those schools over 400 students, it's 1,000.
Quite a bit less than having, yeah.
It's a cost savings,
Yeah.
quite a bit.
All right.
And I will say, we didn't, when we started thinking about this, it was the realization as you start realizing things have become more efficient, that, and requirements have become less, it's just a place that, and to be good stewards, we felt like this is what we could do without really hurting our kids and our schools. And we'll take every one of those testing coordinators as a para or a sub or whatever, because they're wonderful. So,
You can use them in a different capacity.
yeah.
And that's all I have.
That concludes it.
Well, I just wanna thank y'all because this was much better as far as me understanding the budget better. And I don't know, this was a much better format for all of this. Thank you, and for all your work too, for putting it together. This is great.
There's been a lot of effort on these.
Yeah. I can see that. Thank you.
And it helps going into a budget or it helps going into anything at this point if you're all hearing it at the same time.
Yeah, I think when I first started, we were right into the budget and had no idea what was going on. So taking the time to actually talk us through it was very helpful.
Thank you.
All right.
So I have several questions.
Go ahead.
All right, looking at the staffing standards, I was just kind of, for some of our much smaller schools, you know, there's a couple of schools in there in the 100s. Do we have a need for a secretary in all of those schools? Is that like an SOQ that we have to have that, or is it one of those things where could we do like a half, kind of like we do with bookkeepers or those sort of things where we could
There
split?
is, on the bookkeeper, the bookkeeper is split if it's under 200, but, that is really, they only have one, and some of the really small ones only have a half that they share with somebody else, so that's the only person in the office.
Okay.
So if you take away that half,
It would be really
I don't know
hard.
who would be sitting there.
Answering the phones, taking messages from parents, especially at our elementary schools, because there's a lot of parents coming in and out. So there's also the requirement that they have a lunch break and things like that. So that's always been, our bookkeepers, and Randy could speak more to it than I can. I mean, they are also, probably 80% of their job is really secretarial stuff too, answering phones, going in, you know, their backup clinic for nurses, things like that,
In the elementary.
at the elementary level, yeah.
It's a support position.
Mm-hmm.
I think years ago, somebody asked them, was like, the bookkeepers, it's like, well, the bookkeeping in middle and high is totally different. But in elementary, it's about 20% of the work, but with all the secretarial work, we believe it's needed. At the low levels, yeah, they get a half-time bookkeeper, that's the only adjustment. There's only 2 schools sharing right now.
Yeah.
So that's,
You know, now that again, I'm just talking about potential staff reductions. If we were to increase that number to say 250 for a bookkeeper, it has to be over 250 to get a full-time bookkeeper. Would there be any potential savings there? I haven't looked at your elementary school.
you'd have to look at the
You'd probably
the
eliminate
number
one.
of students, and then we also, you know, for some of the positions we have, there's little asterisks on, you know, on some of them, like, I think guidance and stuff, and also for clerical. We do include if there's preschool there, in the number, so when you look at the student enrollment of 120, but then you go, why are they getting a full-time bookkeeper? They really have 200 kids there with all the preschool and stuff. So we do add the preschool in, that's a separate funding formula from the state, so we do consider that when funding for secretary work. You're gonna be interacting with parents and kids.
So by SOQ though, what is absolutely required is a part-time up to 299 students and a full-time after 300 students, one.
Okay.
I think when you look at that, sheet and it says support positions, I think I have it separated out. School-based secretaries,
School-based clerical.
yeah, we're about 12 above what the state's recognizing there on my support documents.
I gotcha. So just to ask the question, so we're 11.89 above, and obviously you can't split a person. What if we met the SOQ standards? What would that, you know, we brought it back to, hey, we're gonna follow the SOQs.
Yep.
What would that mean in dollars and cents? Is it something to where, hey, we're gonna save $1 million is
When you're
great.
looking at that support sheet, what we have up and above, and we have to go to staffing to balance the budget or somewhere. I mean,
Yep.
You're right, that's what you're looking at. What can you do? Meet SOQ, but you also look at the support, which are recommended but not mandated.
Mhm.
So where do you actually have to go to balance the budget? Those are good questions to ask. We would take, if you change the standard and I said, okay, that's 5 positions, I would estimate the all-in cost for an employee, that means salary plus fringe, and multiply that out. So for a teacher, you'd say, okay, average a step 7 of a teacher plus the fringe, you're talking $70,000 probably for, a clerical worker, 45 to 50, all in maybe. Because the ones last in would be the first ones you would remove because of seniority and stuff. So we do estimates on all those. So if any of the board members have questions on those, I can do calculations. As long as you know the impact, but once again, you gotta balance the budget.
Yeah, that's
So,
like, I'm not.
If the money's
I'm
not there,
saying we gotta do
something
it.
has to happen if
Yeah,
the money's
that's
not
right.
there. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. We could work that up and.
Yeah, I have estimates for all those positions and I calculate those constantly throughout. Yeah.
I guess what I'm looking at, and I know all of our in-school staff interacts with students, but I'm guessing I'm looking at if we're having to, for me personally, if we're having to prioritize, instructional staff would take a priority over clerical staff if we had to find somewhere in the money. Not that they're not all important, it's just, you gotta find it somewhere.
Hard choice.
Yeah,
None of the choices are nice,
that's right.
but in the end, choices have to be made, and I understand, the questioning, we could run numbers on any of those. Yes, sir.
Because what I'm worried about is, not even as much this year, there is concern about this year. But if we're not gonna start moving our staffing standards in the next 3 years, we're gonna have to, I'd rather slowly cut it or slowly just not add those positions back when we, not backfill those positions, rather than having to, just go through and start slashing. So I'd rather start, if we're gonna start knowing that, hey, we got this cliff coming up, I'd rather slide into it than just kind of drop off of it.
Yeah.
Well, same result though.
Yeah, it's just, give yourself a longer leeway to say, hey, instead of,
Maybe something else. will
hey, if we're gonna be cutting these staff positions, going, hey, we're not gonna be backfilling these staff positions moving forward. To where we've got more of a ability to, not as harmful of an impact, hopefully.
Gives people a chance to brace for impact.
Mm-hmm.
So
Cause it's coming.
it is coming, and this has got the wheels turning for what kind of changes can be made, need to be made, have to be made.
Cause and going back to our, the state SOQs with the number of schools that we have, I would say in the past, whenever the school board has made a suggestion to close a school, we've always made it of, we need to make a suggestion to close the school next year, in 6 months, in 8 months, and whatever. If we know we're gonna have to close the school, but it doesn't have to be right now, and give us a little bit of a lead time to do that, I think that's the discussion that I'd like to start having is, I think this budget, it doesn't look great as far as this year, but I don't see it far more challenging than last year's budget. I think what I'm really concerned about is we need to start making suggestions now for those.
I would agree. I mean, as this board goes through this budget, I don't think this is like the sky's falling this year, but I'm trying to paint a picture of what the next 3 to 4 or 5 years look like, and there's some challenges ahead. I mean, we can get done with this budget here and feel pretty good about it, but Dr. Calvert's gonna present where we are on salaries compared to our division. And so there's this slow trickle of falling behind in a lot of areas. And so you don't see it in 1 year. It's just been a slow drain. And so it hasn't kind of like garnered the attention. But we're getting to the point where there's nothing left to drain and you're really gonna impact programs and the classroom.
And we need to start talking about things we need to put that discussion in the public, circle, so to speak. So that people know where we're short and where we need to improve upon. So I think that's when we get into the budget process, you'll see some of that. The reality is that you may not get it, but we need to have that discussion about why we need it. And that's showing up on some of your rankings.
So I have a question, and I know, Mr. Hegel, you touched on this, and maybe this is a question from Dr. Woodford. You had said that some of our high schools are very small. Is there any way to combine the middle school and high school in the same building, not necessarily in the same? I mean, they would share maybe the auditoriums and stuff like that, but not, have them in a different section of the building and just combine the middle and high schools together in some of our districts.
I think if our enrollment continues to decline long-term, I mean, that's gonna have to be looked at, because you go, okay, is a high school of, in theory, a high school of 600 or 700, okay, it goes down to 400. You got 4 grade levels of 100 each. That's an expensive building to run. And so if it continues to go down, I don't know if they all fit. We can look at that and what would that look like and how would that run? We're looking at, we look at all those areas. We talk about it, what's possible. Sometimes it's like, you're crazy, but then we go back. And so the executive staff is looking at a lot of things where we can save money and stuff, but that might be something we could look at, but we haven't done a detailed analysis of
Well, then
that.
I'm just thinking like, for example, and this is
Ms.
just.
Purvis, excuse me.
Sorry, you have to go.
No, we all have to go because we all have to be back here in 20 minutes. And so we can carry on this discussion. We've started a lot of stuff and lit a lot of fires and things, but we're gonna need to take a break and adjourn this meeting so that we can be on time for starting the next one. So do I have a motion for adjournment? So moved. Second?
Excuse me.
Mr. Hill, all in favor? Say aye. Aye. Opposed?
You successfully.
Say no like pizza. Thank you.
Dr. Eli?
Joanna, just gavel.